Hello and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a hot-headed, underhanded, hotshot paparazzi with nothing better to do than to invade people's privacy.
Tim Longo. Yeah, that's me.
I'm co-host Brad now. That's what he says when you defeat Carlito the first time.
Right.
And so we're in the food court. We are, of course, talking Dead Rising because, of course, I haven't got that far in the game, so I'm still. Although, notably, today got past the furthest point I had reached in my initial play of this game some years ago, over a decade ago, because I defeated the killer clown. So. Killer Clown on the Space Machine. Killer Clown from Outer Space is down. Nice.
Adam, the Killer Clown. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you maybe story-wise aren't as far into the game, but that's sort of, I think, part of the point of playing the game is structurally. You've, whatever you said, you're like level 23 or something. So it's like, as far as progress goes, you have made a lot of progress.
That is true. That's true.
It's not the traditional.
Yeah.
The traditional.
I have restarted the game many, many, many times.
Yeah, exactly. Which is just such a funny, odd, weird game.
In fact, this week I went back to it and I was like, oh, I could have sworn I had a save that I could go from. And I think I just last time when I died, a week ago, because I haven't played since last week, I think I was like, well, I'll just start again.
Yeah, when I saved progress
and forgot. Yeah, just saved progress and moved on. And I was like, I guess I'm gonna have to do all of this again. But I am now, at the point where I'm like, I think I'm just gonna go forward. I mean, I might loop several times because I'll fail and I'll want to retry, but I think I don't want to start from the beginning anymore because I don't want to try to achieve this run again. So, but
and you're when you say this run feels like the one you said in pre-show, you have successfully saved everybody up to this point. So
I have, yeah, except for Kent, who hasn't died. I just haven't done his mission, which is to find like 3 or 4 perfect photos or something like that. Like, a perfect erotic photo, a perfect horror photo, or there's a way to solve it. You basically have to do something for him. And I don't know how that works because he's not in the world anymore. So I think I just have to do those things and go back to where I would find him, and he'll come out and be like, you did it, or whatever. So we will see, if I do that, because it's, one of the things about the quest is it's sometimes hard to keep track of what you were supposed to do. And his is the worst for that. Because it's like the many times I played him before this run, I had to get him to that fist pump, emoji, animation. And this time I went and was taking pictures of him where he appears in like this little restaurant. And he did the fist pump there in that space, and I took it, and I was done with him in like 2 minutes instead of like 10. And I was like, "How is this possible?" Like,
yeah,
it was really funny because I thought I was supposed to learn other stuff from him, and you can learn about the perfect picture that gives you all the prestige points, but you can also just like get his shot right away. Apparently, it was like, okay, because he has this whole thing where he's like, let's go to a different location, and he starts taking pictures and kicking zombies in the head, and like he does all this stuff, and then turns out you really just need to take this one picture of him in order to move it along. It's bizarre.
It's yeah, we kind of touched on it in pre-show, but I don't think it's one of the topics we listed. But you were kind of alluding to it. I think it's a good example of maybe I've been trying to put my as I've been replaying this for the podcast. I've been trying to put my finger on why I like the game so much, despite it gets, by the way, more and more problematic in some of the characters coming up. So
I believe.
I mean, it's a train wreck as far as that goes. But and I think that to the point of you can do that so quickly with a character like that, that objective, I don't know if this is the right way to put it, but kind of like mechanically, it's a very simple game, and structurally, like once you kind of understand how the mall is laid out and all that kind of stuff and what the flow of the main missions are and stuff, it's pretty simple. But as opposed to, as we have been the whole series, I'm going to keep comparing it to Resident Evil because it's such an easy comparison, but it's such a systemic game in so many ways. And I think that was back then, that was my kind of big surprise with it, because I think in a way I kind of was going into it wanting more Resident Evil and assuming it was like Resident Evil in a mall, but like with some humor. And it ended up being so much, so different from that. And the fact that you can, and I think we'll get into it with the clown as well, the clown fight, that it's just a funny phrase to say out loud, that because it's so systemic, that it's much more player agency. There's many more ways you can do a particular thing, and therefore the player stories are going to be quite different, especially if you are saving certain survivors and not others, or you're doing that in different ways. You do them in different orders. There's obviously the case files have a critical path mission flow to them, but even those can kind of come, you can accomplish those in some slightly different ways too. So I just think like the fact that you could come in and do that photographer mission many times in a similar way, and then one time do it in a very different way and quick way, I think is a strength of the game too, right? I'm going to be agree. Yeah, no, I'm not saying. I wasn't saying you weren't saying it was a weakness, but that you were saying it was a weakness. But yeah, it's just so cool that it's like if I feel clever, or maybe it's luck, you just kind of luck out. But if I feel clever and I think, I can do this a certain way, I wonder, or more to the point, I wonder if I can do this in this other way.
Right. Yeah.
And then it usually lets you.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, one of the things I would say about this run in particular was it's also been the most efficient run I've done. In that I got things done so much faster because I knew exactly what I wanted to do next, and I've also gotten to the point where I'm like, I dodge the zombies way more than I engage them.
Exactly.
And so
you change your tactics.
Yes. It's like, okay, I want to get this woman from the jewelry store. Well, I have to do these other two first, and then I'm going to have to kill the convicts and get her. Like, there's this order that appeared, but I got way more efficient at each of those. First, I mean, in some cases, I just got better. I was just better at killing the psychopath, convicts in the Jeep. I could just do that more quickly. But also, I knew how to deal with each person the most effective way. So, that woman, Sophie, she's actually pretty good. You can hold her hand. Actually, you can't give her a weapon, but you can hold her hand. It's a very eco kind of moment. And like pull her along, but then you have no attacks. So you don't want to do that, but you could. I thought that was funny. With the woman in the jewelry store, it's way faster just to carry her. Like you piggyback again, you don't have a weapon at that point, but you just kind of like put her down somewhere where it should be safe. And, in a place where there's lots of zombies, like the doors and things. So it's been a real switch, and some things that took me a long time, like getting her back was a nightmare. I could not get her because she was moving so slowly, that I finally was like, there's gotta be something else to do here. And I discovered that you could just like, instead of giving her something, your interaction with her was to carry her. And I was like, oh man, this is going to be so much faster because at level 23, I think there's only 3 speed upgrades and I have 2 of them. So I'm, almost as fast as I'm going to be. So it's way faster. I mean, for me to just run with her, and dodge all the zombies, which is a skill I've been building, right? So it's like all these things are coming together as systems to make this run the most effective run so far, So
yeah,
we'll see. I might get to a point where I'm like, oh man, I really want, like, I don't know how many more levels I'm going to get if I'm just playing the game forward at this point, right? So, and I don't know how many levels there are. I probably can figure that out from the upgrade tree. But I was wondering, like, am I in, shouting distance of that? Am I going to achieve sort of max level by the end of the game at this point?
right.
Where I won't get any upgrades. So I'm kind of curious about that as well. That's kind of my last question, other than story and weird stuff that's going to happen. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's also a good example of why this game is so weird, because it's not a traditional flow and kind of power curve. You're not, that, again, that's why I was saying in pre-show, I'm really interested to know what kind of usability they added to the deluxe remaster, because there's certain things that today, like the fact, I don't know, I feel like in the modern era, the fact that you don't have that answer, like, right, should I continue on this one? Because the last thing you want is to get to the end of the game and feel like you're under leveled, but you've gone so far that there's no way you're starting over.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so, like, is there a way for them to communicate through UI or whatever to say, like, this is your trajectory if you commit here? But, to your point, like, I actually had thought that I might be behind you on story stuff, but it turns out I'm actually a little ahead of you.
You're ahead of me, yeah.
Which I'll explain later what happened to me there, because I now have to start over. Because I basically, it's funny what happens when you fail the story campaign stuff.
Okay, right, yeah. So I mean, the thing that makes it, I was thinking about the thing that makes it difficult to predict is the one thing you don't know is how many skills there are. So there's all these attributes, and you can see how much they're going to fill. But how many skills are there?
That's not in the.
There's a list, and it just shows that there's another
marks.
one. Yeah, not even multiple question marks, just one. So just there's a next one. There's always a next one, but you don't know that are there 10 next ones, 20 next ones, 50 next? Like, right. I don't know.
That's the yeah. I mean, that's what I mean. Yeah, like they could easily give you that skill tree.
Yeah, they could just tell you all of that.
or like how many. I mean, obviously getting the pips in your attributes is also another way to say, okay, I've completely leveled up. I mean, I guess that's the fork in the road question, is you're trying to predict your trajectory to basically get as close to max level as you can if you were to start now, versus grinding until you have everything full, right, and have all the skills, and then start your final run.
Yeah.
Which is a put a pin in it segue for just the run topic that we want to hit. But it's just such a fascinating thing, right? Because it's like traditional kind of RPG game flow. That's not a typical way to think about things, but it is. Yeah, I mean, kind of bring up Dark Souls, I guess.
Yeah. Here we go. Butternut.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, whether Dead Rising was on their mind or not. I think it was obviously in the sort of collective subconscious of people, etc. And it's like the fact that the whole world respawns after every death, and this concept that your souls are out there where you died. And there's some simple tweaks that are simple to us now from a deconstruction perspective, but we didn't think of, right? So they obviously were not simple to think of. But there's something kind of so pure about sort of simulating a similar structure to Dead Rising, to this game.
Yeah.
But how Dark Souls made it almost more usable, because what happens when you die is so simple.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, no, it's just everything respawns. And I'm obviously talking about Dark Souls 1.
Yeah.
Everything respawns. It's always that way. Your souls are out there. You can grind or whatever. But the concept of like those runs and learning a run, like Undead Parish,
yeah,
the bane of my existence. It's just but it's like I don't have to guess at the rules, right? I have what souls level I'm at, and I can, like you did, grind, or I can just kind of perfect and then the concept that if you don't get your souls, you will lose them, right? On the first run. And so this is a different structure here where it's like you're not losing anything, but
only if you go back to the save. So if you
that's what I mean.
Right,
that's which is how I've been playing.
I mean, and that's how I'm playing now. So we'll see. I want to talk about the clown because I'm very curious to hear how you defeated the clown. I want to talk about how I came to my my decision on how to defeat the clown, which took many, many tries. But what did you do? I guess is just what I want to know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so this, this run, or these sessions of play that I had before this episode, I ended up, because last time I stopped playing, I stopped at the clown. He had one-shotted me, I think I mentioned last episode, and I was like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do now. And he's obviously, I don't think he's critical path, so you don't have to do him, but I was definitely going to do him because of what he gives you after you kill him. I wanted. But because of the way I'm playing, as I just said, like I'm still, at the time I was level 3 or 4. And so I started this session. I was like, okay, well, my save is right near him. I'm just going to see what I can do. And basically my approach ended up being, again, not to play the drinking game again, but to kind of Dark Souls him a little bit, in that I knew that he could one-shot me. I knew that I was not equipped. So like we talked about last time, it's a Kyle SL1,
right?
Souls level.
Souls
SL1. That's what I was doing basically. It's like, okay, I am under leveled for this fight, but what I'm going to do is just, I'm going to die a lot, but I'm going to learn his patterns. And it turns out that his patterns were pretty good. Like his telegraphing is really good. And so I started learning his kind of like pause points after his attacks.
Right.
And so I would basically, bait him into attacking, dodge or get out of the way, or even just, walk backwards because he's not that fast. The only bad attack is his one-shot attack is when he does that sort of somersault, and that will one-shot you. But the rest of them are pretty easy to avoid, but he always has sort of a down period right after his attacks.
Right.
And so I would just wait for him to attack, and then I'd go in, and I have the blade, the blade book with 3 katana in my inventory. And so the only bad thing is if you hit him when he does this sort of like block with his chainsaws, then he'll instantly break your weapon.
Breaks the weapon,
So I was trying to avoid those. So that's how I eventually, and it was just persistence in a very Dark Souls boss kind of way. It was like learning the patterns, knowledge is power. And and with the katanas, I was actually doing a better damage than I thought I was going to do because my stats aren't very high, but I was able to whittle them down. But because I was wanting to commit to every run and attempt on him and not just kind of reload, there was one run where he broke all my katana. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to just punch him. So I'm just going to see what I can do. So the funny thing, and I actually almost killed him. Like he had a sliver. He must have had a sliver because I couldn't even see his health bar, but he didn't die. So what I did was and I can't wait to hear how you ended up getting him, but what I did was I went from store to store and had him follow me, and I just threw cash registers at him. I probably threw 10 cash registers at him, and they actually were doing quite a bit of damage, and I got him down to almost dead. And I forget what happened. A balloon hit me or something, and then he came in and killed me. But I, it was like, okay, I just want to see if I can do this. So I threw, like I said, I threw multiple, and basically, we talked about this in pre-show, but I love the fact that they just drop this boss into a mall section. It's not like a boss arena. Some of the others will be that kind of. And so the fact that you can just kind of like train, kite him around, and as I think you're going to talk about, he doesn't do well in small spaces.
Right.
And so I exploited that a little bit too, but I basically just threw a bunch of cash registers at his face. And I think when you direct hit with him, throwing a big object like that, it knocks him over too.
Oh, yeah, that might be, yeah.
Yeah, so that was just a funny anecdote of like, I didn't succeed on that run, but it was possible. Like I could have done, it's possible to do it that way. And so that's with me with no weapons, just throwing found objects, which I thought was really cool. That goes back to my whole point about how systemic the game is. It's like I actually forgot too how many different attacks he has. He does a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I think the balloons are super interesting because it leverages the physics. And then he throws knives. He does his somersault. He has his spin around. He has his block. He has the blowing
that fire
with like an aerosol can or something. I don't know what he's doing.
I'm
there.
not sure what he's doing there. But
so it's like very elaborate boss for what it is, and maybe very Capcom-y in some ways too, I'd say. But so I really enjoyed picking him apart and like finding that, again, kind of Dark Souls rhythm, where you just like, you look for the tells, you wait for the right moment, go in, slash with my katana, and that's how I ended up getting them. So what about you?
Pretty similar, actually. So one of the things I discovered earlier in the run, when you're helping Brad and he takes you to where the old dude is in the bookstore, that's basically the point in the game where they say, oh, you can change your cosmetics, because you get a call from Otis right after that where he says, oh, you're in the entrance plaza. You should check out some of the clothing stores there and, and whatever, see what you can find and change your outfit, if you want. So I'm like, okay, cool. Well, I'll go. And because there's almost no zombies in that area because they're still teaching you, and you've come into this a lot of story stuff. So they don't want to have Brad have to fight a ton of zombies while you're just having this one interaction with this old dude who's locked himself in the bookstore. So I'm like, well, I'll just go around and see what's here. And, it's like, there are a ton of clothing stores. It's almost all clothing stores, but there's also like this, somebody's knickknacks or something like that, or, I don't know, souvenirs or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's like odds and ends. And I'm like, huh, okay. And I go in there. At the back of the store, there's a case that you can break with like shields and helmets and things. And when you break it open, the only thing you can take out is a battle axe.
Amazing.
Yeah. And I'm like, huh. And so I picked up a battle axe, and then the battle axe is really effective, but it doesn't last long because it's got a wooden handle. So I would usually get like 3 of them because it's an infinite store. Like you can just keep taking battle axes. So what I found with the clown is I couldn't shoot him because he does that chainsaw blocking thing. That's what I tried for a while. I tried to use the ships against him. I mean, one of the things I would like the game to do a little more is to like telegraph what you should do. Like, put something in the environment that feels kind of special to that environment that would be effective against him, something like that. Just to pair options, because otherwise you are like experimenting for a long time, which, your mileage may vary. I mean, the number of times I died to this guy in the past, I was not happy with it. This time it was still a lot, but I was kind of like, well, I'm going to get him this time. And I'm going to move forward in this game because we're playing for the podcast. So, but the thing is that because the battle axes break so frequently, that wasn't viable with him. I got like 4 of them, and they were breaking, and I didn't do enough damage with 4 that would break. So I also had to find that book.
Yeah.
That's in that store. It's
in the store with the Japanese tourist.
With the tourist, right? But the problem there was I was in there trying to see, well, is there anything in here that I could use? And I found that book. I was like, oh, cool. But when you go into that store, it activates their survivor story. Oh, and if you don't deal with them fast enough, they'll die. So what happened to me was I found that book. I went all the way back to the place where the battle axes are, which is, through the food court, through the next section, into the next section, and then had to come all the way back, with like several battle axes. And they died in that transit, in the time that it took me to do those things. So what I had to do instead, I went and I'm like, well, let me see if this is effective. And I killed the clown with one try doing that. And I was like, oh, okay, so that's going to work. But I can't do it in the order I'm doing it. So I had to go back to save before this, where I don't go into the bookstore. I go all the way back and get the battle axes. Then I come back and then I get the book, because then I just fight the clown. And basically the other quests, I think, are sort of paused. Like they're not going to die while you're fighting the clown, because I fought him for a long time. I fought him a number of times, but so in the end, I ended up with what I wanted, which was the book that, gives you the 3 times longer with the edged blades. And I had 4 of them, because occasionally they would break, and, so I wanted a whole bunch of them. I found 2 things were effective with him. So one was that when he blows up the balloons, if you pop the balloon next to him, he also is affected.
Yeah, totally. And you come out of it sooner.
Yeah, and you get in an attack, maybe 2. I think just 1. And then the other thing was I went to a store that was long and narrow and had basically a low divider across the whole store, lengthwise. And I just kept getting on the other side of that divider, and he'd go and do that somersault attack, and he couldn't reach me. So he'd come and then he'd pause, and I'd be able to get in a swipe. Yeah. And several times I got impatient, but if I just waited him out, and like when we went to the knives, I'd go outside the store. Yeah,
you get impatient and you make a mistake.
Exactly. Yeah. But I basically was maintaining a lot of distance from him, so none of his attacks were really effective except for the knives, and the balloons. But even the balloons, I was so far away that if they got me, I would come out of it in time before he would get to me. So it was finally working, and I was using everything together in that systemic way that you described. I didn't, it felt a little exploitative, because I knew he was having trouble with this environment, but I was using all the information I got about him to do that. So I kind of felt like, well, I don't know, he can't somersault through this thing. He probably shouldn't do that attack, to be fair, in that situation. But I don't know, it worked for me.
Yeah, right. They could have made him a little bit more systemically aware of his surroundings.
To
accommodate them. But I think I agree with you. They chose to put him in an open mall,
right,
as a boss, and so I feel like
the onus is on them to make him work. Yeah,
using the geometry is everyone's gonna do that, right? And you and I both tried the same thing, where it's like it made a lot of sense to us that the amusement park ride would have some effect.
Yeah.
If you got him to
be on the track,
if he got hit by one of them, so that would have been a really great option too. But
I wanted to see that kill video, like if you managed to push him in there just before.
Yeah,
that would have been cool.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But that divider you found in that one building or that one store, that just sounds like similar to my jumping on the bed assassination.
Exactly.
From Morrowind, where you're just like, I'm just going to jump on the other side of the bed, and what are you going to do? And then I'm going to jump on the other. So it was
exactly like that, because he would keep jumping over the divider as well, and he'd get over there.
Yeah, but
and he'd start going into that attack, and I would jump back over.
Yeah,
and so he'd do his somersault, and it'd be like, haha, I switched sides on you again. So it was very
you feel clever, right? You feel clever to do it, and I think that's good.
The one time when I burned through all the battle axes doing that, I was using like a handbag in there. Because there's like a ladies' accessories store. It's like shoes and bags.
You're just hitting them with
I was trying to hit him with the bag, but it didn't have the reach, and it just didn't work. Didn't do enough damage. So yeah,
I really wish. I like I said, he had a sliver. Like I couldn't even see his green health bar with my with my cash register run, but
Yeah,
I really wish that would have been my
that would have been amazing.
finishing run, because it almost, like, obviously this is my own headcanon, but it almost felt like he was more pissed than normal because I kept throwing these. I just go to the next store and find a cash register and throw it at him, and then he'd fall down and he'd do his grunt and his laugh, his weird laugh, and his frustrated, and then he'd get knocked over. So it's just the fact that they let me do that, right? They could have very easily had
he could have
certain,
defended it. Yeah, I mean, he could.
yeah, they could have had certain weapons not work on him. I guess that was the point with the guns, right? That is, to your earlier point about like giving you better telegraphing. That is the one thing they did, is to very clear that guns probably aren't going to work on him.
Yeah, you can occasionally get a shot on him.
Yeah,
and occasionally he will actually. Sometimes he would lose me in that room, in that store. Like I'd go outside, he'd come outside and go back in, and he'd start stalking around. So then if you went to the other entrance, you could just line him up and get a headshot in on him. So like free damage, but then he was right back at you. So I didn't do that at all in the actual combat where I defeated him, but I had done that in some others. So it's like, okay, so there is a way to do this, but it's going to be really slow. The gun windows are similar to the ones I was using. I think, like after he does the spin attack, there's some time afterwards where you could shoot him there too. Because the thing is that with a controller anyway, I don't know if this is different on the PC, but with a controller, it's actually very hard to line up the gun.
Yeah, it's
anyway. It's very slow moving, and it's like, and they have no assistance at all.
Their aim assistance and acceleration curve. It's not a shooter.
They're not there. Yeah, and so it's like, when I'm using a gun, it's because I know it's either the convicts, in which case, I basically have gotten behind a tree and they're running into it. And I'm kind of like popping out, lining up a shot, taking as many as I can. I'm popping back behind the tree. Or I have some distance before we get to the zombies and I'm escorting someone and I just want to clear it out so that we can run through, an area. So I'm using the guns very kind of tactically, in only certain situations. But it's cool that I know where to go get more all the time as well. So.
Yeah, I have a major advantage with the guns because of the mouse, for sure. So there's like no problem other than it's not it's just not very precise. There is a Carlito fight coming up for you that you're going to be frustrated by.
Oh, good.
that is a similar thing where you're going to have to hide behind things and.
I mean, the first one was like that. So
yeah, very, very unfair. And if it feels unfair to me, then it is unfair, like player's prerogative.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of other things that, like, based on we'll have to talk about it next episode, but because you're almost there, but I can't think of anything I was doing wrong to make it a better, easier fight. Brad is with you, so he kind of becomes a distraction for you while you're fighting him. But basically, Carlito has his own gun again that is instant hit for you. So you have to hide behind pillars and wait for him to. Yeah, it's not great.
He does patterns of shots. It's just, but to line him up while he's reloading takes. It's very difficult. Sometimes I don't even get him lined up and take a shot before he starts shooting again. It's that slow for me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there's
very frustrating.
Melee doesn't even seem to be an option at all. You can't get close to him. So
yeah, exactly.
As with this next fight, he has a different kind of gun. I won't spoil it, but so it's silly. But
I hope it's one of those ones that you shoot and a flag comes out that says "bang" on it. Is it?
No, definitely not. It's the opposite of that.
Oh, too bad.
Anyway, yeah. So the clown, I think, is just such a great. It's like we said, it's a very memorable character and boss, and just not just a weird boss tonally, but just a weird boss design wise because of where it is, I think, and how you trigger it, and then. I just feel like even in the PR materials and marketing materials for this game back then, it's like he was such a, he's juggling chainsaws, which is, by the
Yeah.
way, one of the PP shots you get. If you get a good shot of him doing that, you get extra.
Oh yeah,
when he's juggling.
I was too focused on him. I'm going to get by
Yeah.
this guy this time.
Yeah. Every psychopath has one of those signature shots that you can take. But he's just, he's such a distilled down version of what this game is all about. I feel like, because he's not a zombie. He is a human who's gone off the rails, no pun intended. But then the best part for me, and I just had such joy when I did beat him, because then the small chainsaw spawns, which also is applied to the blade book.
Right.
It counts as a blade. And I remember even the light blue color kind of came back to me, because it's a different color than the two-handed one. That was my go-to. Other than,
can you carry more than a bunch of those? Like, does it spawn as many as you want?
I don't know. I don't remember the respawn rules, but it's the same as, I think it's basically the same as other ones. So I was carrying 3 or 4 at one time.
Oh, so if I okay, so if I go back there, I'll be able to get more of them. Awesome.
Get the book. You get those.
I already have the book. Yeah.
It's the cheating weapon, I think. It's just too powerful. And when you have the book, you just can mow through groups. Like it's kind of you're fearless at that point. And a little bit of a pro tip spoiler for you: it's very effective against other bosses.
Yeah.
So it's and so are regular chainsaws. It's just they're big and bulky, and you can't carry more than one. So it's really So not only is he a memorable boss, but what you get as a reward, not just a shortcut, which it sounds like I forgot about. With that one survivor. Yeah. But you also get one of the best weapons in the game. So,
that focus for me on doing the survivors has been really helpful, because, first of all, it forced me to think through, like, what am I going to do about this guy? If I felt really clever, as you pointed out, like, oh, okay, systemically, I know as long as they don't die in the 30 yards between their store, me exiting their store and going to him, they'll be okay, and I can go rescue them afterwards. I have plenty of time. But the real win was that, he drops the chainsaws, which is great. So I picked up one of those. And then if you use his badge, it stops the machine. And a guard was has been spinning around in this machine the whole time, which it would have been good if he had kind of come out and like spun around and fell down. So I had these 2 Japanese tourists who I each had a handgun, and this guard comes out and he's like, follow me. Like, I know a shortcut. And I'm like, cool. That's awesome. But meanwhile, there's a horde of zombies that are on the other platform. And so they're just like blazing away, nice. And because there's a gap, it's like, they're actually just covering my rear at this point, and so that was pretty fun. So I still had the axe. I was just mowing through stuff to help this other guy. And finally I pulled them off, be like, okay, follow me now, because we're going to go, I don't have to come back and save your butts. But he basically takes you to the bathroom. So you get to save. I was like, oh, thank God. If he took me someplace where I was in danger, because I didn't have any healing things. I was all loaded up with weaponry and books, and so I'm like, if this doesn't work out, I'm going to be really, really ticked. But he takes you to like the woman's bathroom, which is where there's a save. And then there's a shortcut from that bathroom back to the one in Paradise Plaza. Like it's a teleport shortcut. Oddly, he stood in a place where I couldn't get to the shortcut. I had to jump on the sinks. So it was super weird. I'm like, he told me to come here, and now he's just standing there. Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, and I couldn't get by him. And
use the follow command maybe or something?
I think he was blocking it. Yeah, maybe if I had him follow me, I could have pulled him off and then got in there or something like that. But I jumped on the sinks and I could get to it. So it ended up being fine. But it took me a few minutes. I'm just like, what is going on here? Like, it's like he's broken. He's just standing there looking at himself in the mirror. It's very weird. But yeah.
And then I got systemic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But then I got all 3 of them, back to because it's not very far from the bathroom on the other side to the warehouse. And I had a queen bee, and so I could clear out the elevator quickly. I mean, all just like everything was coming up chainsaws. It was a good,
that just again, it's almost like they built in speed runs to the game structure, right? It's like you know the order of doing things, and to like because there's timers on pretty much everything. You also kind of like have to pick. In my memory, though, again, I probably won't see it for the podcast because I'm not playing that way for the most part. But my memory is it's like there's also this sort of learning of where the survivors are and what their timer looks like, and having to like sometimes it's you know an unintuitive order of things because it's like the one that is farthest away has a shorter bar.
Right.
So you kind of have to do things in a kind of a weird order to make sure you maximize the run if you do want to get everybody, because that bar is going to empty out too fast. So I have to actually go do this thing. And then to your point,
when I'm very efficient though, as I've been on this run, like I have so much time like to get to all of the ones so far. Like it might get harder, certainly. Although I also move faster because one of his attributes is speed. So it's like a lot of things that are helping me at this point. Plus I can carry more stuff. And so,
yeah, it's great. It feels so good when you start getting some of the leveling up attribute stuff.
Yeah. When I was like, oh, I can carry 8 things. I was like, oh man, I'm so powerful. And now I'm thinking, well, I know it's going to be 4 chainsaws, the blade book, and I don't know, a couple handguns, and maybe, you know, a healing item. They're like, could be.
Yeah, exactly.
And and you do that. You're like, okay, what's my loadout now? And I know where to get all the things I want. Like wine bottles are great. They heal tons of damage. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I had also forgotten, because it's good that we're playing in such a contrasting way, because the survivors, you know, they obviously are good for getting you experience points. They're good for, you know, leveling up and stuff. But I had forgotten, you know, that they also give you things like shortcuts, and there's various sort of other elements. And also how unique they are. Like you said, you can carry some, you can hold some hands, you can give them weapons. Like it's another systemic kind of like, set of features with having the NPC stuff. So, and they embraced it.
Plus the keys that aren't keys, you know, as well.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there's a lot of layers to the survivor stuff too, let alone just, you know, they're a personification of your success when you get them back to the base.
Right. They're all there.
Because they're there, you know, and you can, I think you can talk to them again if you want to too.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can.
So, you know, I always appreciate games that kind of have that sort of such a, like a, you know, like I said, personification of your progress and the effort that you put into the game. I thought, you know, Arkham Knight did a good job of that back at Gotham Central, where as you take out the villains, you know, they all show up there, even the thugs. And so by the end of the game, you know, the jail is full of all of your accomplishments, essentially. I like that stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good stuff. Yeah, and, you know, we've also talked about that with something like, you know, Zelda, where a lot of systemic things are people in the game, you know, like there are characters to speak to do things, you know, and things like that, rather than like a store, you know, I don't know, you know, kiosk or something. You know, there's Tingle, you know, and how weird Tingle is or whatever in some of the games. So, you know, I like that stuff too. I like it. I like whenever you can personify different aspects of a game. I think Far Cry 2 does a bit of that as well. I think we might have talked about it in that way because of the followers or the companions or whatever, and you know, also all the quests were basically
our people,
you know, and tie into their kind of storylines. So I love all that stuff.
Yeah. Really quick, I did want to mention, so I'm still not actually sure why I got the failure. I wasn't sure if I ran out of time on this particular case main mission. I do wish it was clear which missions were critical path and which ones were optional, because they're kind of all on the same list, or at least I haven't seen a difference. So I either ran out of time, or like the bar finished before I could get meds back to Brad, or the in-world time clock basically had expired or something for the next one to pop up. So anyway, whatever happened, which this never happened to me when I had played in the past, all of the case files after that basically get turned to red and are not, you can't progress the story basically.
Oh, I had this happen to me once back when I played it originally. I forgot that, but yeah, I did see that once.
Yeah, and basically a big message comes up and it says the truth has vanished into darkness.
Oh, jeez.
And they're talking, because you're pursuing what's going on with the zombie plague, and the doctor, right, the professor, and
the bees.
Carlito, and I think it's Carlito's sister who you're gonna.
Oh right, yeah.
See soon
seen
again.
Her in pictures. Yeah, she's actually in the list of potential of characters.
Yeah, you're gonna meet her soon. And there's a section of that. But anyway, yeah. So it's like, so basically it's. But the cool thing, which I didn't know, is like, okay, now the story I cannot. If I kept this particular playthrough, I would not actually get to see how the story ends or what's going on. But to their credit, the game doesn't end. So I got that message, and my case files are all X'd out, so I can't actually progress them. But I just went back into the mall, and I still had some psychopath quests up, so I went and did a couple of those because I just wanted to see like what the game did at that point. And I guess Brad died. Like, I don't know. I don't know what happened.
Yeah,
he might be back there. Just I actually should go back to the safe house and see if he's actually just laying there dead or not. But so it's just I just wanted to mention it as a small note that it's very cool that in this kind of weird semi-open world game, but like multiple runs game, but also they've kind of like, they have this story structure kind of threaded in, but it's also threaded into the rest of the mission structure. But there, right, a lot of the missions and survivors are optional. And so it's such a weird, the way that everything's woven together is so weird. But then even once I can no longer progress, and I'm kind of inclined to see if I can play without the story for the rest of the time and see if the helicopter shows up.
Oh, I'm sure it will.
And just kind of go
and not get the true ending.
I guess I don't know what kind of ending I would get. No real story ending,
right?
Because I don't.
I mean, Frank can still report on the zombie outbreak. You just won't have the whole story, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's vanished into darkness.
It has.
So it's just a very, I feel like, especially in this era, it's kind of a bold move to allow the player to just keep playing. Yeah. I guess obviously the GTAs of the world, or the open world games, had the sort of structure of like, you can do the missions, but you can also just go and do whatever you want. And then there were always the, like we talked about probably with Morrowind or whatever, it's like, there's the main stories and all of the faction quests or whatever, but also you could just keep playing in the world, So.
I mean, but to that point, something like two things. The problem is solved in different ways in those two games. The main storyline. If you fail a main story mission in GTA, it's like, retry. Like, it's not.
That's a good point.
It's not. You failed for good.
And they always do that because they're a premium. Their story is a premium to them.
Right. Exactly. So they want you to invest in that. And then in the case of Morrowind and subsequent Bethesda games, the key characters for the mainline story quests are not killable. So their way around the problem is you can't accidentally kill a critical NPC. We actually tried to address this in Skyrim, and couldn't make it quite get there. Like we were very close. And they may have done it for Fallout 4. I can't remember if we continued to work on it. But basically, the idea would be the quest would say, well, for a story quest, like I want to do this, the next step is, whatever, some step in the Dragonborn storyline. You don't know because you haven't played it. So there's some step here. Well, what we need is a noble to give this quest. So are there any nobles in the world? Like basically Mad Lib it together a little bit and then direct the player to the location of where that, the new quest giver would be. And if multiple people were involved, do that for all the roles. But it ended up being just not, a
more
lot
trouble
of work
than it's worth.
Well, a lot of work for fairly little payoff, really. Just making the characters unkillable, works for most players, and they're not really upset about it, except for the people who want to kill kids in video games. So we're not really catering to them, or we weren't.
Jeez, yeah. No.
Oh yeah, there were people who were very upset that you couldn't kill the child characters in Fallout 3 in particular. So,
yeah, of course,
yeah.
Of course there are.
Yep. Well, because I guess you could in Fallout 1 and 2. So, which
times have changed.
Yeah, I guess. But people haven't. So there you have it. Anyway.
Well, we better be careful about that track.
Just going to move right on. Speaking of tracks, let's get back on track with the last topic we had for tonight, I think, which is we also have the kind of some weapon stuff maybe, but the mundane location. This might be a good final topic because we can go to it. We have a couple of emails. You had mentioned in pre-show, like, it's all just set in this brightly lit mall, and albeit the lighting does change a little bit. It gets a little dimmer at between midnight and dawn and all that stuff, presumably because there's no sort of global illumination from the sun, and they just kind of dim all the environments. But they also like shut down the escalators, which I love. It's a great little touch point of like, oh look, it's after midnight. None of the escalators are on. Like it's automatic or something, because obviously nobody's around actually managing those things. The mall setting is very, it's very interesting, especially with something that's open worldy, to have something that's kind of not very different anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's you mentioned some of the lighting stuff, and I mentioned it in pre-show too. But now that I'm thinking about it, there's also probably some technical aspects to that too. I think it sunk in with me. I put it down in my notes as a topic, the mundane aspect of the game, because I love juxtapositions like that, especially with kind of the horror genre and especially with zombie stuff, where you're really, the one thing I will say that Resident Evil is generally very good at is it partners the location and the tone and the feel of the world with the situation quite well. I think 7 and 8 are just like masterclass in that. It's like you are in 8's case, right? You are in a gothic horror location and everything is very cohesive. But here, and I had forgotten about this with this game, but it is one of the things I really love about it is that, it's obviously a wacky game and yes, very problematic in some very, very bad ways, but also it's tongue in cheek. And it knows that it's a wacky zombie game, and it's set in a mall, and the psychopaths specifically, they have we talked a lot about the clown. They have a lot of fun with them. And with the supermarket section or boss fight that you're about to hit was another sort of like, there's some quotes, he has some really bad things that he says, but also some really amazing quotes that I think will be great for the intro for the podcast.
Oh, okay, good to know.
on his death. So, but it takes place in this fluorescent, fully lit, empty supermarket, and it's
Yeah.
like the shelves are stocked and there's like soy milk on the shelf and there's an app, and you can like pick up an apple as you're fighting and eat it. And it's just there in the produce section. And then there's this psychopath with this, spiked out shopping cart who is protecting the supermarket. And it's so fun to be in these locations and have them be such a contrast to what's happening. And there's another one that happens in a hardware store, which is a pretty on the nose. Like, of course, there's going to be one in a hardware store, but what they choose to do also problematic in some ways. But it's also very interesting character, and it's all melodrama, of course. But then a grisly scene as well, right?
Yeah.
You're in this. And what this guy has done is, really rough. And so, yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to make the point that, I think, and we know that the Romero movie was an influence for this game for sure, because it's, very one for one. But
maybe also 28 Days Later.
Yeah, but
there's a section in, maybe it's the second one, with
where you're kind of
grocery carts.
Yeah, it could be. Well,
I'm like trying to place the scene. I can visualize it.
Yeah,
like I can remember, like it was like a gang, with their carts. Maybe it wasn't that movie. If somebody remembers, go ahead and email in.
No, I think you're right. There might be something like that in that, or it could even be Shaun of the Dead. To be honest, like there's some.
No, this was way grimmer than that. So there was some fun stuff like that in Shaun of the Dead, but it was no. This was definitely like it's really, really dark in the location. They've barricaded the exit with like barbed wire and all this other stuff, and like I can totally picture it, but I can't come up with the movie because I probably haven't seen it in a couple decades. But anyway,
yeah, it rings a bell, and specifically what I'm talking about is not like the fact that this isn't largely there isn't a dark and grim, representation of these places. They're intentionally is like I could be just shopping in this market, and it looks like a normal day. Right. But on the next aisle, there's the psychopath or whatever. Right. Or and I love that stuff. Those are also my favorite, like, as far as zombie fiction goes, there are aspects of Fear the Walking Dead, which I really appreciated more than the Walking Dead show, because it showed the beginning of the pandemic. Right. And so you see, there's those moments. There was this one show, Black Monday, I forget. Yeah, there's a pretty good zombie series out there that is also about the beginning of it, and there's always those great moments. And even Last of Us does a good job of this with the flashback scenes, where there's always those moments where it's just normal everyday day, and you're walking. The characters are walking down the street, and then all of a sudden, the zombies have started. And they're just running through. They're running through the supermarket, or they're running down the street, and people are like, what's going on? It looks like a normal everyday setting, but then there's the zombie coming after you, and that shock. And so anyway, it's such a good contrast to the Resident Evil series in this way. And to be honest, like my memory of the other games after this, they don't actually do a good job at retaining that. They do get darker and grittier and more post-apocalyptic, and that sort of sense of, because I think that I'm over talking this now, but because I think they thought to themselves, we need to have a canon for this series, and so with each successive game, time has passed. So of course the world has gotten like 28 Days Later, and then 28 weeks later, because they did follow-ups. Right. And it's like, okay, this is when people have been living with zombies for many years. And so, of course, that mundane has gone away. But at least with this one, everyone's like, zombies? What's going on? And the market is still intact. Which
it's funny.
Quickly.
It's weird. Well, I guess what they're trying to do, because you want to develop iconic characters maybe that you return to and things like that with video game series often, like instead of treating it more like an anthology, which is what basically Romero's of the Dead, are. They're all kind of happening at the same time. I mean, I think the later ones, not so much, but Like the very last ones, I think, are more like time has gone by, and not so much that. But they're not returning to any characters because, of course, generally speaking, all the humans die. So
Everybody dies. Yeah, I would have much rather, like, the second one takes place in Vegas, which I thought was that was a good
yeah,
that
that's
was a good sort of
that's good
like
recognition.
evolution, and it's a different character and stuff. But like three, which I've said, we played a lot of. I played many hours of. It's very post-apocalyptic, right? And like the humans have really hunkered down, and they still have psychopaths and stuff, but it's like things have been going on for years, right? And people have started to live with the zombies. And then four, my memory is, it's like they wanted to return to Frank and they wanted to return to the mall, but it's like I think he returns to this same mall, but like stuff's really bad. So it's sort of lost its charm too. So I really don't think they've captured it since the first one, to be honest. To your point on anthology, I think it would have been way more interesting to have multiple games take place at the same time, but just in different places.
Yeah. I mean, that's basically the first three Romero movies are all basically simultaneous. Like,
night, day, dawn, and day. Yeah.
I think they are basically happening at the same. It's like there's the zombie outbreak, and one's at a mall, one's in this house, and one's on a army base, and beyond that, I don't remember if they kind of feel that way, but they all feel like they're happening at the beginning of an outbreak, when people haven't figured out what to do yet. So, our last thought is maybe the movie I'm thinking of was Girl with All the Gifts. So
you've mentioned that movie to me, and I have not seen it. So
it's good. It's good. Yeah, I recommend it.
I do think 28 Days Later has a scene like that, and which
I think it would be weeks
Walking
later,
Dead copies a little bit in the beginning with the hospital, right? Where he wakes up in the hospital and not knowing that fudge hit the fan. Sorry, whoops.
Yep, I'll deal with it. Yeah. Anyway, let's. I guess let's turn to email then. We'll come back to other topics next week and do our takeaways. But for now, let's turn to a couple emails sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. Sir, I give it to you first for a question that neither of us will probably be able to answer.
Okay, good.
Time to think about it.
All right. Well, I definitely haven't had time to think about it because I'm reading it right now. Subject: lies, darn lies, and statistics, from Mystery E. Dip. I love mystery. Hi, Brett and Tim. I was thinking today about the linkage between displayed stats and stats/percentages in games and the underlying simulation. I know there's fudging sometimes for things like tactics or RPGs, where players expect a 90% chance to hit, to actually be 9 times out of every 10, rather than real 90% roll of the dice every time. I also recall reading a developer story of an arcade racer where you chose from from a few different vehicles, each with different listings for things like acceleration and handling, but in reality, they had coded all the cars to perform exactly the same. Oh man, those jerks. I was wondering if there were any anecdotes you could share where you intentionally disconnected some simulated game stat from what was displayed to the player, and why. Regards, Mystery E. Dip. P.S. If nothing really comes to mind, do you have any favorite stats that were tracked in a game, either visible or hidden? Maybe favorite examples of hidden stats. My favorite example of hidden stats is Bubble Bobble, where all the seemingly random things that happen, giant gems, special letters, etc., are actually deterministic based on reaching certain numbers of things tracked, such as steps taken, bubbles jumped on, etc. My favorite visible stat is Pants Exploded from Fallout 3 and carried forward for reverse pickpocketing a live grenade into someone's inventory. I remember first seeing that stat in the menu and first having a laugh over it. Then second, wondering how to achieve it. Thank you, Mystery.
Yeah, I couldn't think of anything that I've done in games where I track things that we used. I think I thought about doing it for Starfighter for difficulty, but we ended up going very simple with that instead. Like if we tracked how much you missed, maybe we make things easier, or I may make things do more damage because you're just not hitting that often. And so to have this sort of excitement level, but instead we just we just had player settings, and player chosen, easy, medium, hard. So that was a thing I remember thinking about but not implementing. And then one thing I know that we had and didn't ship because it was a development tool, was for Skyrim. We actually had I had somebody from IT hook me up a heat map server, so that when QA would test the game, we knew where on the map they had been or not, so that we could just point it out, like, hey, you might want to throw some people down into the southwest area of the map or whatever, just to see where all the where most of the pathing, where most of the player time, and we just take a snatch location every, I don't know, 30 seconds or so. It wasn't very, because those playthroughs are very long. It wasn't very fine grained. It wasn't like moment to moment. It was more like periodically some, just to give a sense, because, if it was more frequent than that, we wouldn't have had the resolution on the map anyway. But yeah, that was the thing that we did that we didn't ship, that would be useful to know for, player behavior. But when you sell that many copies of a game, the servers would have been overloaded on day one. So glad we didn't do it. I can't think of anything though. I don't know if you have any.
Yeah, I mean, this is one I'd have to really spend some time thinking about. Trying to, as you've been talking, I'm trying to like go through stuff. I mean, telemetry wise, like we have a lot of stats always behind the scenes that we don't reveal, especially in some of the multiplayer stuff. I'm trying to think of anything really that interesting that people don't already know about. I can't think of them. But I mean, as far as like his original point, I definitely don't have anything where we were revealing something that wasn't true, I guess I'll say. And the reason I will say for that is, just through the happenstance of games I've worked on over the past, especially 10 years or 15 years or so, I've been working on franchises where the community and the player base is very attuned to what the game is doing.
Yeah.
And you do not want to do that, because they are very good at reverse engineering how things work, intentionally so, because they want to generally min-max how to play the game the most efficiently, right? And so and they will then thus be very vocal about it. And so you definitely want the truth to be out there. One tricky thing that I guess I'll share as an anecdote that we were all very truthful about, but was an answer people didn't necessarily always like, is matchmaking. Josh Menke is a professor / genius PhD matchmaking designer who's just worked everywhere. But I was lucky enough to get to work with him at 343. Now Halo Studios, and he's worked on all, Call of Duty, League of Legends, everything. So he's like a matchmaking wizard, and he was always very good out on Twitter /X to be very vocal about how matchmaking works. Because if there's one thing that was always mysterious to people, it was like, why was I matched with this particular group of people? And people were always found ways to complain about it. Because they would lose, right? Or whatever. Like, why wasn't a bad match? And, at the end of the day, the algorithms are complicated, but they're also not so complicated. So he was always very good about like exposing.
They can't be because
exactly. They can't,
have to run quickly.
so it's
they have to work with what's there. It's not like you can, arbitrarily do things like, well, we have this many players playing, you can only do so much. Yeah.
Yeah. And he would kind of systematically go through the process, right? Especially once you start your career of like your first 10 matches and how he ranks you, and then how he gets, all the very very math oriented stuff that I never understood. But it's like, at the end of the day, versus Mystery's question, where I ended up on the games that I ended up on, where you end up tending to want to go is over explaining things, not under explaining them, right? Or hiding them, is that people really want to know how things are working, because they generally will have skepticism and criticism that they aren't working right.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you want to make sure that they understand that they are. It's just ended up not being in their favor, or they just lost the match, and
Yeah,
that's okay.
Somebody has to lose, right? I mean,
somebody has to lose. Like the concept, the thing that was so demoralizing to me, but I totally understood when Josh kind of like really hit it home. And he actually, now that I think about it, I think also worked on StarCraft 2 back in the day. That matchmaking goals are about 50-50. You want wins to be 50% of the time and losses to be 50% of the time for it to actually like function.
Yeah.
And people, that's a hard pill for people to swallow because people don't want to lose.
Yeah, they don't want to lose. Yep. Yeah.
Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent.
No. I mean, matchmaking is a good one because it actually reminded me of a patent that I think EA filed about basically matchmaking at some rate, showing, basically putting you in with a player who has better gear than you have deliberately to show you something you could buy.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So that was one thing that I remember being, I remember when it happened, I was just like, this is oily. I like this. And it might have been EA for mobile. Like, I can't remember the context. It might not have even been EA, so I should not cast aspersions, but I do remember it being somebody. There are not too many companies who patent a lot, so that's why EA comes to mind. So that was one thing. And then the other thing was one thing we actually did track on Republic Commando, but wasn't shown to you anywhere. It did have an in-game result, was if you shot your own commandos a certain number of times in a certain period of time, they would turn on you. So, and then they had special lines for when they took you out, if they took you out. So,
and then they would revive you.
No, then they would not revive you.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it'd be, you'd have to go back to an earlier, you'd have to restart the level or begin an earlier.
That's a good solution. I wonder
yeah. We didn't, we just tracked it. It wasn't even a high number. It was like 10 times in a minute type of thing. Like, it could happen probably accidentally, but most players would not see it. If they're playing the game as intended. But those who were curious, like, what happens if I shoot my buddies a lot? It's like, well, they will shoot you a lot. And we didn't do any. You could beat them, I guess, at that point. But anyway, that's a thing we did. So that did
briefing your own squad, your own AI
briefing
squad.
your own squad. Yep. All right. Well, let me hit the other email because I don't think there is a question in here. This one is subject: zombies, journalists, and achievements. Oh my! It's from Jaful. It says, "Hey guys, I love Dead Rising. It was genuinely a favorite at the time, and I'm going to have to play through it again. I'm just debating getting the new version before I do. That said, there's a few things I'll mention which others may also have mentioned. The population of Willamette is actually seen on a Welcome to Willamette sign as you fly towards the mall on the helicopter at the beginning of the game. Nice. I will also note, because I played through the opening cutscene again today, the pilot also says the population.
Oh, okay. Nice.
I think that's a great example of an achievement because once you get it, the sign, which probably seems so normal you missed it, now seems like a wink and nod to the player. This playful recontextualization of game items is what I consider a genuinely good use of achievements. And this was at a time when many people, including me, were not sold on the very idea of achievements, as Microsoft's trying to tie it to your quality as a gamer. Meanwhile, other games like the King Kong licensed game gave you all its achievement points simply for finishing the game. Not a long game either, as I recall. I think that was like a 6-hour quick. Yeah, I was like, hey, here you go. That achievement, along with the general idea of achievements being tied to photos, are the kind of achievements that made me realize assignments could be fun, or achievements, I guess, could be fun, and even a good metagame challenge between player and developer. That and the fun of things like knocking over 10 zombies with one bowling ball, etc. That said, even before you get the Mega Buster, I'm pretty sure you can get a toy one, which pops out small toy balls that are plastic or Nerf, which makes it a silly costume and fun in-joke until you find out about the real one. All that said, I'm an avid zombie fan since my youth. I never got tired of the trope that they underscore people are the real danger. And most often I've felt games disrespect zombies by treating them as Goombas that should be stomped with abandon with no real concern of being a threat. And while in most ways they aren't a threat in this game, being just a fun enemy to hack and slash and place Lego heads over, the fact that some survivors are intent on running into them keeps them a threat in some way at all times. This goes a long way with me. Love the game, and of course, love the podcast. Thanks, Jafool. Thank you, Jafool.
Yeah, it's good points. Yeah, there's really good points in there. And I still, even though they're not, I don't think seemingly kind of like individually a threat, I can't think of another. There's got to be a game out there that I'm not thinking of, but I can't think of another game that simulates, like I think we talked about in the first episode, that sense of there's that flip of the switch when you get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
In a group of them, because the whole concept in this, and the Walking Dead show has done a great job at this throughout its history, and the comic, there's nothing scarier than that. Like you wade into a couple of them and you're like, I got this. This is going to be fine. And then all of a sudden,
there's
30, one of them grabs you, and then 10 more around you, and you're like, oh no, I'm actually in trouble. But it just kind of sneaks up on you.
The thing that happens to me in this game is, and it doesn't happen too often, but I've died this way maybe 3 times this playthrough, is that they're enough around me that they knock me down.
Yeah.
And then you have a QTE, which to my frustration, when this is introduced, because this doesn't happen very frequently to me, so I always forget by the time it happens again. The first time you're told how to break out, it shows you like use the left stick, throw it left, right to break a zombie grab, right? Mm-hmm. And it shows, if you're attacked and knocked on the ground, and it says press triangle, but it's not press triangle. It's press the QTE button that's displayed when it's displayed, to get out from under the a pylon basically. And almost every time I'm jamming the triangle button because I'm like, I gotta get out of here, gotta get out of this, because I've forgotten that it's gonna be circle or X or square or maybe triangle. So far it hasn't been. So I've every
press
time
the wrong one.
I'm pressing the wrong one because I'm remembering that on the screen where they introduced this mechanic, tutorial screen, it says triangle. And because I'm not reading the whole thing, I'm just looking like, oh, left, right on the stick or triangle. I miss it every time. And
there's a good lesson in there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's worse for me because it's all keyboard based. So it's like I'm like, oh, E? Okay. Oh, yeah, definitely didn't find E quickly enough or whatever it is. It's like
right.
They're trying to keep it all around WASD, but it's not like a controller where your mind mapping is pretty clean.
Yeah, pretty clean for me, for sure. Well, thank you for those sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. I feel like we had a review a couple weeks ago. Always love to have them, and I get the Apple ones, etc. If you've put it somewhere else, just let us know. We'll go track it down, or you can just send it in. We love to read them on the air. We're on the web at devgameclub.com, and my co-host twitches occasionally at twitch.tv/
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
You are still in the world of ruin, as are we all. So hopefully we'll see you getting back to that at some point. Isn't that the game with an evil clown? I got to stop.
Oh boy,
I don't know if you were planning on doing it this week. Damn it, Kafka.
I'm gonna try.
Okay. We also have a fan run Discord. There is a link for that in the show notes. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast Aaron Evers, and our logo, the Discord, merch store, all of those things are by Mark Garcia. Have fun juggling chainsaws this week, and good night.
Good night.